Hi, this is Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the Senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville. You are plugged into the Conduit Street podcast, the very best place to learn about the policies affecting local government in Maryland.
Hello and welcome to the Conduit Street Podcast, the official podcast of the Maryland Association of Counties. I am Kevin Kinnally, today joined by my co-host, MACo Executive Director Michael Sanderson.
Kevin, I'm glad to be back with you on the pod and also back at the MACo offices, at the studio, the majestic podcast studio. Very exciting.
It's a wonderful thing as the rain comes down outside, even more majestic. And today we're joined by a very special guest, one who is very familiar to our listeners. His picture is downstairs on the wall. Congressman Olszewski, a MACo past president, former Baltimore County executive, former state delegate, and now representing Maryland's 2nd District in Congress. Congressman, thanks for being here. A lot going on. So we appreciate your time.
Sure thing. Happy to be here.
So glad to have you back in the fold at MACo and glad to have you still engaged with counties and on local issues. But we can just sort of talk big picture stuff. It would feel kind of awkward to not mention that we're in the middle of a federal shutdown. We're recording in late October. We're closing in, I guess, on a record duration for a federal shutdown. But I guess as a member of Congress in the middle of this and some system shock of doing different stuff than you've gotten used to as a Maryland player, can you talk a little bit about how your constituents are feeling this and how you see it as being a player in this high stage?
Yeah, and thanks again, guys, for having me back. It is great to be back in the MACo building. And just really appreciated my time here. One of the most important roles was that time as MACo president. So really trying to bring that perspective to Congress. And I can tell you that we're seeing a lot of hurt, a lot of frustration. Mm-hmm. Maryland has many federal employees, over 22,000 in the 2nd District alone. Maryland also, unfortunately, leads the country in terms of those who've already been fired under the Trump administration, over 15,000 individuals who've been riffed or fired or otherwise let go. We know that Marylanders and Americans are on the verge of losing their SNAP benefits, even though, and we can talk about this more, there is a $5 to $6 billion contingency fund that the president has chosen not to tap into. But we are seeing people who are impacted in sort of 3 ways. It's been a wild 9 months. It feels more like 9 years in some respects. Yeah. But so as it relates to the shutdown specifically, currently the 2nd longest in history. I would not be surprised if this unfortunately becomes the longest. But the 3 observations I have about the shutdown are, 1, that federal employees are being used as pawns. And, you talk about people like Russ Vought who threatened to fire federal employees, which I think is absolutely wrong as just a principle. 2, we know that Americans are being hurt by the delivery of services not being delivered or not happening. Yeah. So whether it's not being able to find out the status of a VA benefit or your student loan, questions about Social Security, air traffic controllers, delayed flights, canceled flights, and then layering on that, you're going to start seeing benefits also. So even more and more Americans are being impacted as this drags out. And then 3, and this is the most important thing, and this is actually one of the lessons I learned at MACo, is we have to talk to each other to find compromise. And no one is talking in D.C. about how to end this. It has been complete silence between the 2 sides. President Trump, I think, had one conversation for about an hour with the Democratic leadership in the Oval. He's now flying across the country. And look, this is a guy who is the great negotiator. And I think that I give the president credit for the deal he struck in the Middle East. I hope that deal holds. It will be historic for this world. But he's not at the table. Speaker Johnson has canceled votes for 5 weeks. Right. So we're not addressing not only the shutdown, but the cost of living crisis that is crushing American families. And so my point is really just we can't compromise if we're not talking. And so we're stuck communicating and being in the district a lot, serving trying our best to help people navigate what is a very difficult circumstance.
You know, your third tenant there, talking to each other. I remember something that always stuck with me. The great Dutch Ruppersberger, I think on this podcast one time said, if we had more people from local government down in DC, we wouldn't have all these problems. And talking to each other is a big part of that. And I'm glad you mentioned that as being part of MACo. You went across the state. You've talked to Republicans, urban, rural, big, little, and that's not happening right now in DC.
No, it's been one of my great frustrations. And one of the things that people have said to me is, you know, Johnny, DC hasn't always been this way. And my response is always, well, that's great, because that means it doesn't have to always stay this way. You know, we have the power to change that. I mean, like there's the other side of that, right? And so, you know, even during our orientation, it was 12 days. We were overnight in DC every day, all night, overnight. There was 1.5 nights where I talked with my Republican colleagues, where we were allowed to commingle. Like it is so embedded currently. But you're right, Kevin. Like that's the kind of mindset I'm trying to break open, and I'm hoping there are others. If there were more local leaders, there would be a big difference. I see it in people who are mayors and even, you know, commissioners, people who have had that local experience. I mean, Baltimore County, we had 4 Democrats and 3 Republicans on our council. Everything we did was bipartisan, whether it was gun safety reform, police reform, balancing our budgets. These weren't all easy issues, but we did transportation, environment, housing. We found a way to have Republicans and Democrats, and it starts with talking. So Dutch had it, I think, absolutely right.
So as we're amid another shutdown, they've become routine. Continuing resolutions have become routine. How do we break that cycle? I mean, we talk a lot about on this podcast, on our blog, and our comms, continuing resolutions. What that means, it just means that once again, Congress is not able to reach a long-term agreement on anything. How do we break that cycle? Because it didn't used to be that way, but now it's become the norm. Yeah.
You're right. And unfortunately, it's become the norm for so long that people are losing sight of what the normal appropriations process even looks like. And I'm a new member. All I've known are continuing resolutions. And we've passed a couple of appropriation bills out of the House, but they've been extremely partisan, completely party line. And my understanding is that has not always been the case, that it used to be the case that knowing that you need 60 votes in the Senate to pass a bill, an appropriations bill, that there would be good faith bipartisan negotiations to at least make it palatable enough that you would get votes from both parties. And so I think it goes back to, we can't compromise. We can't find that common ground unless we're talking. And that's true both for the shutdown, but it's also true for the appropriations process. But continuing resolutions aren't good for anybody. They're not good for businesses. They're not good for local governments. They're not good for our national security. They're not meeting the moment. I mean, things change year to year. That's why we pass balanced budgets at the state level. And we know that things change on the ground. And so we should be doing the same as a federal government. The federal government's actually lucky that they can deficit spend. I'm deeply concerned about the deficit and how it's growing. But there's so much flexibility built into that budget that we could do so many things. And you know, I think as it relates to the shutdown, though, and this particular continuing resolution, that's actually been my bright line. I think Democrats have been right to raise this issue of healthcare and the premiums that are set to really just spike in an overwhelming way for working families. But for me, the bright line has always been it actually being a clean CR. And what we're talking about now is not a clean CR. And I'd just like to explain why I think that. So we're already in a budget that was bipartisan. And when you shake hands and walk away, that should be the deal. But the president and Republicans alone have come back and cut $9 billion from the last bipartisan budget. They've explicitly threatened the Francis Scott Key Bridge funding the president has. Secretary Duffy has sent a letter sort of furthering that threat. And you've also seen explicit withholdings of infrastructure projects in Democratic-led states and Democratic-led districts. I don't think that's who we are as Americans. It's not what my experience was in local government. But as it relates to a budget deal, it does me no good to continue funding if, and some of my colleagues across the aisle have said this, like, I want to see more cuts. Well, if I give you a clean CR and let you unilaterally cut it, whether it's the Key Bridge or any other program, that's not actually it's not a clean bill based on what we've done, and I already know what you want to do. So I would want some protections against additional cuts.
Right. I think the context makes sense, but I think it's also really hard for voters and for your constituents and residents to be able to follow things that deeply.
Yeah.
Just as a like good government nerd, I think there's virtue in passing a 1-year budget that an ordinary person can look at what we do this year, contrast it with what we did last year or 10 years ago, and say, okay, like we decided to put more money here than last year, and that's the way you express your priorities. We're worried about housing, and so we're investing in this side of things more than we had previously. And when you adopt a balanced budget and you do that on a 12-month basis, it actually kind of enables your constituents to see what's happening. It's a dashboard for them. And how could you possibly do that? We've got advanced degrees and we've all studied government and politics and all this kind of stuff around this table. I could not tell you what the federal budget looks like today compared to 18 months ago, 6 years ago, 20 years ago in any like particularly meaningful way. And like I've got to be a top 10%er in that ability, and I'm still hopelessly lost. I think there's something to that you lose like accountability and transparency by having we don't do budgets anymore. We do a series of funding bills, and then everything rides on one farm bill, and suddenly there's missiles in there, and there's food stamps in there. It's like this happens all the time. I like wash my hands of it. I just can't bring myself to follow federal politics. I think a lot of people feel that way.
It's exhausting.
It is. It really is. So
that coupled with the fact that we are so partisan. It's always about going to our corners and screaming the loudest and being on social media and going viral.
Right.
It's no wonder that people are frustrated with, especially federal politics. It's no wonder that Congress has such a low favorability rating.
Yeah, Congress as an entity is universally like way down there.
And I think that's why. I mean, and again, not to keep going back to our local experience, but it's so instructive of what I do now. Not only did we do those yearly budgets, but we passed dashboards. I mean, we had our budget. We have our budget online in Baltimore County to this day, where you can go in and see exactly where those dollars are being
penny
spent.
for penny,
penny for penny, and it's like that's exactly what the public deserves. I mean, it's their money that we're spending on their behalf, and hopefully in consultation, we had our town halls where we would have thousands of residents come out. But it's meant to be iterative. Like that's what governing to me is all about, and you lose some of that the further you get away from the local level. But I think that we can have. There's no reason that we couldn't have a basic dashboard at the federal level that says like, here's how things have changed year to year, or here are the major categories. And we have the technology to do it, just the will and the desire to have that transparency.
So the path out of here, I mean, I'm thinking about like the duration of this shutdown, and like it sounds like you're guessing the same way like the betting markets and so far thought that this is going to go to 35 days and beyond. But you already dropped some hints about pressure points, whether it's air traffic controllers or missed paychecks or folks who miss out on supplemental nutrition and families who are genuinely hungry and desperate. I mean, those will be things that get the attention of their congressional representatives, their senators and so forth. Like maybe the path out of this is through like cross-party collaboration, even if it's not leadership, if it's fellowship, maybe just 3 or 4 random senators start sitting and talking and saying, well, maybe I could find a way to yes if we did this, and maybe I would be willing to give on that. I mean, we're sort of counting 5 heads in the Senate, I guess, is part of the math here. I mean, maybe that's the path. Do you think that's maybe our best shot?
I hope that happens. I mean, I would love to get together with more of my House colleagues, but again, the Speaker of the House has told his Republican conference to stay away from the nation's capital and to not be present. And that's a choice. I think the Speaker's perspective is that they passed, again, what I don't think is a clean CR, but they passed a continuing resolution. We'll just say that. And he's waiting to see what the Senate does. I think that we can and should be addressing the housing crisis, the electricity prices, I mean, it's been 300 days we've been in Congress. We've actually not taken action to lower costs at all.
I recall those issues being relatively prominent back when it was time to vote.
And I think that
I ran on that. I mean, like, and it drives me crazy that the best thing that I've been able to find is that we passed a bill out of the House that increases transparency on ticket price gouging, which is like, okay, but it doesn't actually address ticket price gouging. And I think there are bipartisan solutions in a lot of these spaces. I've passed 2 bills out of the House already with Republican as a Democratic co-lead to Roger Williams, who's the chair of small business, with a partner of mine on foreign affairs, where we have done port security. So it's doable, but I do think it's going to require people actually coming together. And look, even on healthcare, I think Democrats should say, you're right. If you make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, if you're a millionaire, you shouldn't get a subsidy. Like, Republicans are right about that. And if that's happening, great. Democrats should say, which we are, but we should say the second part. First part is federal law is already clear. If you are undocumented, you are not eligible for subsidies or Medicaid. Okay. Republicans would then say, but people are doing it. Well, then guess what? That is Medicaid fraud, just like any other fraud, and it should be held accountable under the law. And so, like any kind of fraud, right. Fraud is fraud. Right. And so if people are getting benefits to which they're not entitled, but so there are spaces of compromise, I think. And whether or not healthcare gets to be in part of that final package, I think will be largely driven by the Senate. I want to see it there because we're really up against it. People are going to see it November 1st when they go to renew. Right. The average family in Maryland, family of 4 making $90,000 a year, will see their premiums go up by as much as $3,000 a year. That is crushing. Right. And a lot of those families can't afford that, and they'll choose not to, which means that their children and they won't have health coverage in the event of a catastrophe.
Right.
So
and you miss preventative care, and you miss regular checkups and prenatal care and things like that. You get longer lines at the emergency rooms. And so, I mean,
take healthy people out of the pool, which drives up premiums for people who are lucky enough to have employer-based health care.
Keep going down. Yeah. I mean, it's obviously unacceptable for premiums to go up that much. And that's going to be terrible if it does happen. But back to the shutdown and how the state and local governments are responding. We know in Maryland, the state leaders have already activated several tools. Some of them developed after the last shutdown. The Department of Labor has launched a no-interest loan program for accepted federal workers. Furloughed employees are eligible for unemployment assistance. Counties are hosting job fairs for standing up resources. The comptroller just announced some tax relief for federal workers. But the states and the local governments are stepping up. There is now this new threat of, well, maybe all the money you're spending, we won't reimburse you for that. And now we're hearing about that with SNAP. And Maryland is thinking about maybe going into the SOC and pulling out money to cover at least some of what's going to be missing from DC. But that just adds this extra layer on top of, usually we're going to get reimbursed for that kind of stuff, right? But now there's this threat. And so how can Washington, and I know this is maybe a stupid question, how can DC during these times support states and local governments and give them some certainty when they're the ones stepping up and saying, we're going to take care of these people, and at least for the government to say, we'll make sure we pay you back?
Yeah. I think that's the answer is in the question. It's provide that certainty. I think it's the uncertainty that makes it so hard to govern a state or a locality. And I have really appreciated, having been there, the ways in which governors, county executives, mayors, commissioners are stepping up and meeting this moment. That's what local government does, especially. We just help people. We feed people. We house people. Right. And it is hard, though, to know that something that was taken for granted before, that we would be reimbursed under a certain program if we stepped up in the meantime, it makes it very hard. I think I left Baltimore County with something like a 16% rainy day fund, which was significant, and we could tap into that. But that goes quick.
Right. Yeah,
when it's a federal program, and now you're asking local governments to do what is usually a federal government responsibility, that does not last as long as you would think. And so I think providing that certainty, it goes back to the shutdown conversation, though, of like, if the House were in, or even if the Senate were to take action of, okay, even if we don't have clarity exactly on how we end the shutdown or whether or not healthcare gets resolved as part of that negotiation, we certainly could provide clarity around food benefits. We could say, yep, we're gonna turn that spigot back on, fund that for the year, for a month or two, while we're trying to figure the rest out. Because I think a lot of this is unnecessary pain that we're inflicting upon the American people. I think it's unnecessary with the food benefits. I think it's unnecessary with the air traffic controllers. There's a letter circulated that I think the majority of the Democratic caucus signed about paying our troops. So like there are places I think of overwhelming agreement, and leaders on both sides oftentimes choose not to advance any of those predictability items because it, quote unquote, loses leverage. And I think that is absolutely the wrong approach to take when at the end of the day, we're trying to serve people.
So you willingly came on the county podcast, and I mean, talking about the federal shutdown and the sort of the issue of the moment makes a lot of sense, but I don't want to miss an opportunity to talk a little bit about sort of your journey to this role by way of local government, by way of serving in a state legislature, because I think that's interesting. Like the kind of person who tunes into this podcast is interested at sort of state level policy and politics and that sort of stuff. And you're more like, close to uniquely positioned, having been a longtime member of the General Assembly, and you were a leader here and a go-to person on a number of different issues. You take a role as county executive, which in Maryland is very much a go-to position. We're full service county governments, and being the head of the executive branch in one of our largest jurisdictions is, there aren't many people in Congress who have had the privilege of that kind of role. So I'm interested, I don't know, maybe I'd frame this a little bit like this. Like we're all parents, and you think you can be prepared to be a parent, and then suddenly you become a parent and you realize all those books and the coaching and stuff like that just could not possibly have prepared you for what the reality is. So talk a little bit about that transition and what surprised or shocked you in the process of heading to DC representing District 2 as a different engagement than being a delegate or being a county exec.
Well, first of all, thanks to those who are interested in these issues and listen to this podcast. I think it's a great service that you all provide. I've been so lucky. I've been able to serve at every level of government. I've been in local, state, federal. I've been a legislator. I've been an executive, and it is a very helpful perspective because you see how all the pieces fit together. And you see both the collaboration and the partisanship, and you see what that means. I think my two biggest surprises were, one, the just extreme partisanship, and people are even being afraid to take pictures with one another. It has been very disheartening to witness. And look, I'm proud to be a Democrat. I think I have solidly Democratic values, but I think we can compromise without compromising our values. And Republicans are not my enemy. They hold different political positions than I do. But that does not seem to permeate our nation's capital currently. But I think that can change, and I want to be part of, and I think actually that's why I'm so glad to bring those perspectives to say we can do things differently.
It's so frustrating, though, because I think so many people are tuned into the national picture, right? They're watching CNN, Fox, MSNBC, whatever they're watching. They're not paying as much attention as they should to local issues, state issues, but they see what's happening in DC and they think that's how it is everywhere, right? This hyper partisanship, can't take pictures with the other side. They think that's all levels of government because that's all they're seeing. Meanwhile, they're missing what's going on here. It's frustrating to try and break through all of that drama, if you will, and, the blue versus red, and say, like, there are good things happening. Don't just pay attention to the dysfunction, and no offense, but like, how do we break through and explain to people, like, this is not the norm, and we can't operate this way. We can't. And obviously there are levels of government working. People just don't see it because they're distracted by what's going on in DC.
I don't know that I have the answer to that. It's been a chaotic 9 months, and things that I have been very frustrated by. But again, for me, it goes back to, like, I'm going to criticize the policy decisions.
Right.
I think it was wrong for the president to pardon January 6th those who were convicted of assaulting police officers. I think it was wrong for him to enrich himself through this crypto scheme, selling private dinners at the White House. I think it's wrong to take the Qatari jet, the $400 million jet. That's in violation of the Emoluments Clause of the U.S. I was strongly opposed to the reconciliation bill. Republicans call it big, beautiful. I call it big, ugly. But largest wealth transfer in recent history from working class to the ultra wealthy, one of the largest cuts of food aid, largest cuts to Medicaid, one of the largest deficit increases in recent memory. Deploying our National Guard, our federal troops to American cities, I think is terribly wrong. I think it is wrong to say that our cities should be training grounds. I think it's wrong to demand the prosecution of your political enemies. I think it's wrong to demand $250 million from your own Department of Justice. I think it's wrong to criticize and go after comedians and try to censor them. I think the East Wing demo is so like it has been overwhelming,
right.
And I am so strongly opposed to what Donald Trump is doing as our president. But Republicans are not my enemy. The
actions rather than the actors.
Well, here's the thing, because I'll never change. I'll never change someone's mind if I can't have a relationship and a conversation. If you and I just hate each other and we're just screaming at each other, I will never change your mind. I will never convince you that even one of those things were wrong. And so that's one frustration. The other frustration was, especially in county government, especially as a county executive with no municipalities, where you were I was effectively the county executive and the mayor.
Right.
We were able to get things done. Oh, that pothole fixed. School construction, yeah, we got to build that school. Let's figure it out. There's, we have a problem with plastic bags in our rivers, and okay, cool. Let's work with the council to figure out how we address. We just did stuff, and people could feel it and see it, and tell you great job or that was terrible. Right. But there was that real time. And things are like molasses.
Like you said, you have to talk to people. Like even here in Maryland, it's like, oh, Lamar's coming back tonight. Like we have common ground. A Republican versus a Democrat, you can find that, and then you branch from there, right? You build from there. But if you can't talk to people, if you can't take pictures with people, that's not going to happen.
One of my favorite things to do is I actually love to go on Fox, both locally and nationally, because what I want to do is have people see that, like, wow, all Democrats are actually like, there are some thoughtful, caring Democrats whose daughters are also in Little League, who help coach, her indoor soccer team once, who,
kind of like me, right?
Who, who likes to have a good IPA or give me a beer, put me around a bonfire, like whatever, like sports. Like we're all, to your point, like we're all just people. And I think that is like, it's so far lost in our nation's capital. And it's something that I hope to change.
Well, I mean, back to like we get things done in county government, and I think to a degree in state government. But part of that is everybody expects you to, right? I mean, if that school is overcrowded and needs the expansion, the residents won't stand for, well, we just weren't able to work it out, and so we're going to go another 6 years without expanding that school. They'll find someone who will solve that problem. And I think that actually happens in local government in ways that I don't think there is the same sort of grocery store accountability the further up the food chain. Like we've written off Congress. We just assume Congress won't solve problems, that they'll be stuck and they'll be in gridlock. And so, look for solutions some other way. Both parties dally with, well, let's do executive orders rather than legislation, and we'll see what the courts say later. I mean, anyhow, I think the reasonable expectation is the folks who are close to me are going to get things done, and they have to. So that's definitely a.
But that's a paradigm we have to shift in this country, because the other thing I see that is frustrating is that while it is completely inefficient and things don't get done and it is partisan, there's so much potential. Like, just imagine if the federal government said, we're going to go all in on school construction to support states and local governments.
Right.
I mean, the comptroller released this report recently that says that there's just incredible amount of need. I mean, I put forward over $2 billion, and we're building 3 new high schools in Baltimore County, and we're doing the hard stuff.
Right.
And we did it in partnership with the state. But just imagine, the federal government says, we know that schools across this country aren't meeting the needs of our learners today. We're going to put forward, an infrastructure bill. Like, that is transformative, and only the federal government has the resources and the capacity to do that.
Right.
But because we're so broken, we're completely, there's all this untapped potential that we're not even like seeing. And then the people who are closer are still getting the grocery store conversations of like, fix my roads, build my schools. And it's just that much harder because we have this dysfunction at the national level.
So forgive me, I have a nutsy, boltsy kind of question about Annapolis versus D.C. Those of us who focus on the state government process, we know that committees are really the backbone of most of the serious policy conversation that happens in the General Assembly in Annapolis happens in a committee. So, a bill is introduced in the House of Delegates here. It's going to be assigned to one committee. It's going to go to the House Judiciary Committee, and they're going to be the one to sort out like the nuances of this is criminal justice policy. We want to figure this stuff out. And if a bill makes it out of that committee, it goes to the full floor for the whole House to consider. But there's always a great deal of deference to the work of that committee. So that committee kind of owns their subject matter. Congress is different,
to say the least.
Right. So may you live in interesting times, right? So this has to be an eye opener as well. So you've got some intriguing committee assignments. I'm interested in hearing both about the areas that you serve on in committee, but also how that process is different in DC than the more ABC stuff in Annapolis.
How much time you got, right?
Yeah, no, I'll try to be as short as I can, although there's a lot there to unpack. I'll say, first of all, the most surprising thing is that there are any number of bills that don't even go through the committee process. So Annapolis has the Rules Committee, which is not used in the same way that the Rules Committee is used in the House of Representatives. Sometimes, so we use the Rule Committee generally to set the debate criteria for how a bill is considered. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the debate over the rule itself is also then considered the actual legislation.
Yes. Right.
So you may have a piece of legislation that was introduced in the United States Congress, there's no hearings are optional.
Right. No guarantee.
There's no guaranteed hearing.
Right.
On a subject.
Yeah. So as a stakeholder in Maryland policy, you have a sense of entitlement that every bill is going to get a public hearing and stakeholders can get their say at a public venue before the decision makers. DC doesn't guarantee that. It happens sometimes, but not universally.
Yeah, in Maryland, as long as I follow the
close
rules,
to universal.
right? If I get my bill in on time, I'm going to get a hearing. But that's not happening.
Well, and by and large, you have the right to testify at that hearing.
Right.
DC, there might be 3 to 5 witnesses chosen by the ranking member and the chair of the committee, basically. So the public is not weighing in a public way on these issues. And that's if there's a hearing. Oftentimes there's not. So you may have the Rules Committee just say, this isn't even to set the terms of the debate. This is the vote on the issue,
right?
Which is crazy.
Right.
And then there might be times when we have a hearing on an issue like the State Department. We had Secretary Rubio come in for a very brief period of time. And then we had a massive State Department reauthorization process in the House, which I don't think will fly in the Senate because it was done in a partisan way. But the committee process is fascinating, and I'm still trying to understand it, candidly. It doesn't make sense. It just makes it way too easy for leadership. Even when we do have markups on bills and we vote as a committee to send them out to the floor, it's often dictated in advance about what's going to pass, what's a partisan bill, there's a lot of pre-planning that goes into it. There are not a lot of amendments that aren't worked out before. Right. And what goes to the floor is less of a product of the committee as it is in Annapolis. You will see, especially judiciary, right? Pop out a bill like, whoa, didn't see that coming. Right. But there are very tight controls, and I think it's done through leadership, particularly the Speaker's office, in terms of what committees are able to send out and not send out.
Yeah. You made one drop that I thought was like the perfect insider comment. I claimed earlier that I give up on federal politics, but I still like peruse through the Hill and other sites like that, right? And from time to time, you'll see coverage of a federal issue where they say, well, the critical vote already happened. It was the creation of the rules for consideration of this bill. And like everybody on the inside understands that the rules were written so the bill will pass. And once you get enough votes for the rule, it's a fait accompli, right? We're done. And so we're going to go through the motions, and that might take a week or it might take a month, but that bill's going to move because now the rules have been set for it to move. And that's a different language than Annapolis. Not to say that there's not exertion of leadership and priorities in the state legislative process, but it's just a different breed, and it's like a completely different dialect down there.
If I could just go back briefly to the point of being a person as it relates to committee work. Yep. So I mentioned I co-led a bill with Roger Williams. He's the chair of the Small Business Committee. that relationship that we have cultivated was really borne out on the baseball field.
So I like that. Yeah.
Roger is the chair of the Republican baseball team. I was lucky enough to play for the Democrats. I started in left field, which I had never played before. Went from high school to the Congressional baseball team, and from first baseman to somehow starting in left field. But
there you go.
But it was frankly the smack talk,
right,
that really started the friendship. That was like, Olszewski, what do you care about? I was like, Mr. Chairman, I really care about workforce issues. Well, I've got this bill. Do you want to help work on that? And so we've now we've led a resolution together on the Small Business Administration. We've passed a workforce bill together.
Love it.
And it started on the baseball field.
That's right.
Right. So it just goes back to, and I love my work on small business. I love my work on foreign affairs. I'm literally traveling the world. We could have a whole other podcast about my concerns about Chinese aggression and how the United States is ceding our authority, but we can stick to local stuff here a little bit.
That's going to be the subscriber only feed, the extra 2.5 hour Johnny heads to China. Anyway, we'll set that aside for now. But
but yeah, it just goes back to those relationships matter. The relationships with my freshman class. I was lucky enough to be elected as the freshman representative on the Democratic side of steering a policy where we set the policy priorities and help identify committee assignments. So it's just been an incredible experience. But again, just the lessons of like how much relationships matter to what we did as county executive, as a delegate here in Annapolis, those lessons hold true even today.
So your district covers parts of Baltimore County, Carroll County, a portion of Baltimore City, very different, diverse jurisdictions, different needs, but ultimately shared priorities. When we talk about DC and DC kind of being its own thing, and then the state and local governments are where the actions happen. But there are things that affect what states and local governments can do. And I don't want to catch you off guard, but FEMA, right? Mm-hmm. We know what happened in Western Maryland. We know that the state hit all the benchmarks to receive that federal funding. We know that FEMA didn't show up. When you were a county executive, you got those phone calls in the middle of the night where you had to put your rain boots on, you had to put the big jacket on, show up to disasters, show up to help people. Can you even imagine a scenario where the state or even a local government would be responsible for something that traditionally FEMA shows up to handle because they're the only ones with the resources to do it?
Yep.
We live in this world now where maybe they won't show up, and maybe after this hurricane season, everything changes. I mean, you being boots on the ground and going through those types of experiences and being there, when people are experiencing the worst moment of their lives, how does that jive when now we're sitting here realizing that FEMA is not going to come? And how can states and local governments even start to think about how they could respond to a large-scale disaster without federal help?
I can't imagine that, right? It's a new world that I'm lucky that I'm not having to try to navigate as a governor or county executive or mayor. What happened to Western Maryland was wrong. They deserve the support from FEMA. I, as you said, had any number of times when there have been those calls. Obviously, the most stark call was when I got a call from my fire department chief when the Key Bridge collapsed.
Yes. Yes.
And I think about what would have happened to the Port of Baltimore and to the thousands and thousands and thousands of people who rely on that if we hadn't had the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the Coast Guard,
right,
all of those federal agencies come to the rescue.
Literally everybody on site right away.
Yeah.
We cleared the channel in 11 weeks.
Right.
An unprecedented effort to reopen the Port of Baltimore. And there was already a lot of suffering in that 3-month window. But just think if the federal government had turned its back on the greater Baltimore region in that moment. But that's exactly what's happening. And so it is going to become, I think, disaster after disaster, incident after incident, where we see why it matters to have the federal response and have that we are there for each other approach.
And this is the ultimate bipartisan issue, right? Like Republicans, Democrats, hurricanes don't care if you're a Republican state or Democrats. It doesn't matter. But we've got to be able, this is another one we have to be able to talk to one another and step out of those partisan corners, because this is like important stuff. These are people's lives. And like you said, if the feds hadn't shown up after where would we be right now? So that stuff keeps me awake at night, especially working with the emergency managers every day. It's hard to imagine that reality. I know it keeps you up at night, and I know that there's only so much you can do, but like these things, I don't think they get enough attention because we're focused on these hyper partisan issues and not on the real work that needs to be done.
Well said.
So I guess back to my issue of moving from the state legislature to being a local public servant and now at a district, I'd like to drop some wisdom for listeners who, I mean, these are folks who, I mean, if you listen to this podcast weekly, like you're in it because you like this kind of stuff. You're interested in good outcomes and good policy and that kind of stuff. I mean, some people are following county government stuff, but the majority of our listeners are just vaguely interested in good government, good outcomes, policy, that kind of stuff. So, a lot of them, I guess, feel like the state process is one I can understand, and the federal process, I don't even know where to get a foothold. So 9 months in and starting to, you get cards and letters from constituents and you hear from stakeholder groups. Do you have thoughts that you could share with a listener or someone who's used to coming to the committee hearing in Annapolis because they're worried about a thing? Well, they're also worried about a thing at the federal level in Congress. What's the best way for them to engage? Is it, is it sending letters or is it more than that?
Yeah, I'd say that there are absolutely opportunities to engage. It will look very different than what you might be used to engaging at the local or state level. We love hearing from our constituents, so send emails, call, try to schedule in-person meetings. Oftentimes it will be with staff members. Just because there's so many demands.
But
on
you're
our
getting
times
all that stuff. Like you have great staff. And people don't. I think people sometimes don't realize that if you're meeting with a high level staff or whatever staff, that's going to get back to the principal.
It filters up 100%.
So don't discount that.
Do not discount. Yeah. And oftentimes the staff meetings actually end up being better because they're the ones who then help draft the bill or who write the letter and so I'd say continue to engage in all of those ways: emails, calls, visits, whether it's the district office, and we have a district office in Towson, which is sort of centrally located for the congressional district, or to go visit. DC is not that far; it's accessible. Come see us in Washington. Our office is actually still working. I'm forgoing my paycheck. I don't think it's right for me to take a paycheck while others aren't being paid. My staff is continuing to work full time without pay. I really applaud them. But show up to the halls of Congress. I mean, you can go to the office building. You never know. You could have, AOC and MTG walk by in the matter of 5 minutes. And if you want to, please be respectful. We're still people too.
Yeah.
But if you have a question or a concern, you have an opportunity to engage. We're walking the halls of the office building. We're walking to and from Capitol Hill. So we're there. And I think also attending town halls. We had a town hall earlier this week with almost 10,000 people, telephone and virtual town hall. Attend forums, attend all of those opportunities to engage. It really does matter. It makes us better at our work.
I mean, and you're duty bound to try and think of the district and think of the people you're representing. And I don't know, sometimes we think, these politicians, they're just reading polls and so forth. You can't poll every single issue and have some scientific measure of this is 61-39 in my district, so I'm definitely going that way. Like the idea of, I've been hearing from a lot of people who are worried about this. I need to elevate the amount of time I'm thinking about it because I'm hearing from people back home.
That's right.
And that's you and your colleagues doing your job.
Yes.
That's not pandering. That's representing.
That's right.
So I like the idea that stuff still has value, and the notion of like meeting with professional staff is an important part of the process too. And not everybody recognizes that. I feel like that, they can feel like that.
Professional staff run the office. I mean, let's be honest. Staff are the ones who make everything go. And so, and I will say that both meeting with them makes a big difference in my office. And we're one of those, I can't speak for other offices, but to your point, Michael, that feedback, especially if it is of a large volume, makes a difference in how we sort of think or tackle or elevate issues.
Absolutely. All right. So this has been fantastic. It's been great to connect, and we really thank you for joining us and sharing your insights on this, at this critical time for Maryland. But I want to end with maybe a positive. Let's talk about the Ravens. We're sitting here on October 30th. Okay.
Big game tonight.
Tonight. Lamar's back.
Yeah.
When everyone wrote them off, I see a path. I don't think we should write them off. I think that they're going to be all right. What do you think? You're a Ravens fan. You're our congressman in the 2nd district. What do you think? Give us some hope for the Ravens.
I mean, look, the win against the Bears last Sunday was huge. I don't know why we didn't have Huntley in the entire time. He's so much more of a Lamar-like quarterback that I think he would have given us a better chance to win those other games. But we've got a decent schedule. I think we play Minnesota in a week or two. They just lost their quarterback.
That's right.
Miami is a winnable. This is a winnable game tonight.
Yeah.
Lamar he's the MVP for a reason.
That's right.
If the defense continues to show up, they've shown signs of life again. I haven't checked it recently, but actually I think some of the betting markets have the Ravens sort of near favored to win the division. Right. So
let's
go. People who set those odds use a whole litany of statistics to help set those, and they're there for a reason.
Yes.
That doesn't mean that it's going to happen. This would be an incredible trajectory and comeback. I think one of the few times it's happened. It's happened before.
Yes.
So, but we have the quarterback to make it happen. I think that candidly, I want to see a little more aggression and animation and innovation in how we do play calls. I'm still stung by that Bills loss. We played prevent offense.
I know.
Let Lamar do his thing. Like, let the offense do its thing. You can't wait for Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes. Like, when the time comes, like, we have to just show that, like, yep, we're going to keep going. Well, we're going to keep going, and we're going to keep going.
When they do come back and they win, it's going to be the greatest 30 for 30 of all time. The Lamar Jackson 30 for 30 is going to be fantastic. So you're a connected guy. When they ask you to come on and like give a comment, or you were at this game, just let me come in the room and like be there for it. That's my only request. Deal. When that 30 for 30 hits, it's going to be massive.
I love that you're speaking it into existence. So
I am speaking it into existence. Well, we really appreciate your time. We'll give you the closing word. Anything you want to close with? Again, thank you for taking the time. You're busy. You came down to Annapolis to talk to us. What do you want to close with?
For anyone out there who is discouraged, who is frustrated, who is angry, and I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican on that front. I put this saying on my board in Washington, D.C. a few months ago. This was before the government shut down. But I will say to all of our federal workers, thank you for all that you do day in and day out. And thank you for your perseverance through this. So for you and for all those folks who are listening, in all things, it is better to hope than to despair. And so whatever it is in which you find hope, I would encourage those listeners to cling to it, because these are tough times, especially at the national level. Folks are suffering and hurting, but I do believe in the end that goodness does prevail, and that it is better to remain hopeful that we will find our way out of a lot of these challenges. So I'll end on that.
Can't improve on that. That's perfect.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you again so much, Congressman, for joining us. If you enjoy the podcast, please go ahead and subscribe. That way, all these episodes will be sent directly to the device of your choice. You can also follow along on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and of course, the Conduit Street blog. We will also post links for how to get in touch with the Congressman and everything that he's working on. But for Congressman Johnny Olszewski, Michael Sanderson, and our wonderful producer, Chantal Malcolm Lim, this is Kevin Kinnally signing off, and we will talk to you soon.